Hello everyone, Molten here and welcome back to another video on the Morra Gambit. Today we're looking at this 6 Bishop B4 variation which has been rising in popularity thanks to Grandmaster Sam Shankland's course and recommendation on it in the classical Sicilian repertoire on Chessable. So we'll walk you through to the position first after the move E4. I'm following a particular game as well. After the move C5, in this particular game the variation went with knight f3, but it just transposes back to our main line. After the move c3, captures, knight c6, bishop c4, and here the move 6 bishop b4, which has been annoying a lot of players from the white side. So I did cover this in a video before, which I'll link below in the description, where I did look at the move bishop takes knight, and I covered how black gets a lot of weak and dark squares in this position, which we can try to take advantage of. But the main move is knight g7, which I hadn't yet covered. So after the move knight g7, I'm going to be following initially also recommendation by Mark Esserman, who plays this opening a lot. After the move queen c2, castles, he recommends the move rook to d1, which I agree with. And after the move knight g6, this is where things start to differ a little bit between everyone. So Mark gives the move bishop to e3 here, and after the move pawn to a6, he gives a line with bishop to f1, b5, and then a4. Pawn takes, knight takes, with a lot of compensation here for white on the queen side, which I totally agree with. And instead though, Sam gives the move pawn to b6 as black, and this seems to nullify this whole a4 idea, and there's no more breaking up of the pawns on the queen side. This is a very interesting counter, and as far as I can see, this is a very solid position for black, pretty much equal. So to change things up, I'm going to suggest to move bishop to g5 instead, which hasn't been played all that often. The idea is really to provoke this move bishop to e7, which I don't think is the most critical move. I think the most critical move is probably actually queen a5, which is more difficult to prove anything for white. But also I mentioned f6 here automatically just loses to the move bishop takes e3, and then we just recoup our pawn with a much better position. So we'll look at queen a5 first. So after queen a5, it gets a little bit tricky because it's hard to suggest a clear-cut move for white, but I went for the move rook a to c1. The main reason is because I don't like the positions after bishop f1, allowing black to capture on c3 and then damaging our pawn structure. I just don't see how white is getting enough compensation in this type of position, and our plan is not that easy to follow through with. So we can also like take with the pawn here and try to keep queens on, but again I don't see how white has full compensation here in this position. So instead of bishop f1, I decided to go with rook a to c1. After rook a to c1, for example, let's say black has a couple of options. Let's say pawn to a6. My idea is to again go bishop e3, bishop f1, and use this sort of b5 pawn as a target where I can open up the queen side. You can also play g3 here, try to go for like some knight d2 f4 or maybe h4 ideas, which might be quite interesting, but I tried to keep things simple and just play the move pawn to a4, and after takes, knight takes, try to maneuver my knight into the queen side with like knight c5 or knight b6 with I think enough counterplay here for white. If instead of a6, let's say b6 is played, then our idea is to play a3. You can also forego a3, which I quite like as well. I like this variation with the move bishop to e3. And for example, let's say black plays knight e5. You have an interesting continuation here after knight takes, and white can play this move bishop to d5, which doesn't actually win anything, but it just causes a lot of variations where black has to calculate out. It's mostly equal after, let's say, rook to b8, and then let's say bishop f4, f6, bishop b3. It's probably just equal, but There's enough tricks here that black has to be somewhat careful. And if you don't like that one, you can also just play a3 and go for the queen trade. Here probably white has just enough compensation, and at some point probably black will have to give the pawn back, and hopefully with the two bishops we can sort of claim a very small advantage, but it's close to equal. But instead in the game, most people have played the move bishop to e7 in this position, and after the move bishop to e7 we have the move bishop takes. The idea is that if knight takes, we want to go queen d2, trying to really stop black from getting rid of this d pawn, and we're going to chuck the queen into the d6 square. So for example, queen d6 in one variation, let's say b5, we drop the bishop back to f1, and again we're going to hit out with this move pawn to a4. And this type of position, similar to what happened in the game, was very difficult for black to handle, and I feel that black does not have a very easy way to equality here. So for example, queen c7, queen c5, one variation might go a5, rook c1, and let's say rook d8, knight d4, and already white is clearly better here because the threat of knight b5 is incredibly strong, and still black is having problems here. All his pieces are stuck on the queen side. Similar in the game, very strong 2600 plus grandmaster here with the black pieces played queen takes e7, and after the move knight to b5 we have the move pawn to a6, knight d6, and he found it very difficult to dislodge the knight from the d6 square. So the game continued b5, bishop went to e2, and the queen jumps into c5, and I think from a practical point of view this is very difficult for black. He has to play very accurately. The game continued, queen d8, rook c1. Things are getting quite uncomfortable now. Bishop to b7 was played, and here white played the move queen e3 with a very nasty threat, which black didn't spot in the game. He played the move bishop to a8. Now a few seconds if you want to spot the winning move. It's fairly simple. It's just to take the knight here on c6. After the move rook takes c6, bishop takes c6, and we have the move queen takes rook, and white is just a clear piece up here, and there's just no compensation for black. And white went on to win the rest of the game fairly convincingly. So that's it for my short recommendation against this particular line. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.